Welcome to the Tradies in Business podcast with your hosts Warwick Bidwell and Nicole Cox. Divert your phone and grab a brew as Waz and Nick unpack tips, tales, secrets and stuff-ups from guests both inside and outside your trade, helping educate and inspire you to break the cycle of gut-busting and money stress and create a true trade business.
What's the number one question we're asked in the Facebook group?
Where do I find the join button?
No, it's the wrong question. Try again.
How much insurance should I have and who should I have it with?
Yes. All of the questions are about, not all of them, but there's a lot of questions about insurance.
What, people are really interested in insurance.
Yeah, because we don't know.
It's because no one has it.
Yeah, well, it seems like there's a lot that don't, but a lot of people don't know.
Or they've got some, but they don't know if it's doing what it's meant to do, and will it cover them for this, and how much should they have for that, and I've got this, should I have this one as well? And yeah, it's pretty, and that's, you know, that's across life insurance, across vehicle, tool, business, and what else is there? Health insurance.
TPD.
Yeah, so people get very confused about all these insurances. Pet insurance. I had that for a while.
I do not.
And then I do love my dog, but I decided not to get insurance for him.
Do you know that we're getting a new dog? We're adopting a dog, listeners. We're adopting a golden retriever, beautiful girl. So I priced up pet insurance because that means I will have 4 pets again. And I'm thinking,
Is that a bit pricey, I bet?
$3,500 earlier this year for Otis because the golden retriever male, because he had a tummy ache. Essentially, so that was expensive.
It's an expensive
and I'm thinking,
tummy ache.
What happens if they both get a tummy ache in 1 year? I need some insurance for that. I'm not sure I can afford 2 of them to go down. But it was like, I think it was almost $700 or $800 a month for the 4 animals.
That's impressive.
Okay, so Otis is 9 and Shelby is 8. And given Shelby's history of being a puppy farm dog,
gotcha, they
were not. In fact, they really didn't want to insure her anyway. And then there's 2 cats, and they're 6 and 5 or 7 and 5. So because they've sort of reached over that 5-year mark, it becomes really expensive. And this is so boring for our listeners, but it leads to the same thing, right? You need to have the right insurance for the right thing.
$700 a month.
It was really expensive. I wrote back, especially to the Woolworths one, and said, "Are you for real? Is this really for real? Can my dogs really cost that much money?"
You're talking like $10,000 a year.
So I could put just half of that aside and have enough for emergencies.
Exactly. Which is exactly what I've done with our Labrador, is we self-insure. We stick an amount of money in a bank account every month.
Yes.
And we've already got enough to cover most sort of, car accident stuff, or, eats a toad and needs his stomach pumped and adrenaline injections and all that sort of garbage. But, yeah, more than one pet, that would get hard.
Well, I've just spoken to the pets recently and asked if they could just do it 1 year at a time. So if Otis, you're up next, and then Shelby, it's your turn. Mia, if you can go a year or 2 after that, that'd be great. Yeah. Penelope, look, she's the youngest in the family. You need to wait 5 years. It's
nutso. And if we sort of loop back to the whole insurance thing, the amount of money we spend on our pets to save them or make them okay or whatever, and yet we quibble over insurance to protect our income.
So true.
When that's the thing that runs the whole house.
Yes.
And it's you know what? In most cases, it's a buttload less than $700 a month.
Yeah, I know.
To insure your income.
Doesn't make any sense, does it?
Now today's guest, he also has a family dog called Rufus.
Well, I did not know that about Antonio.
There you go. Now, Antonio Perez, that is not his full name. But if you have a listen, he'll actually tell you his full name. He's Chilean-born and grew up in Canada.
That's terrible.
So he's a bit of a hybrid, Antonio, and now he's an Aussie with a dog called Rufus, who is very passionate about life insurance of all things.
I know, it was really cool though. How often do we get to speak to passionate people about insurance? And
apparently he also did an impersonation of Ricky Martin doing the La Bamba at a company conference recently, so we outed him on that too.
And we're looking forward to the video footage. Thank you.
So you've got to have a listen to that one. But today's episode is really important because we do get asked a lot about insurance. So despite our 4-minute waffle at the start there, today's episode, Antonio pretty much lays it out for you as far as some of the things to be aware of. How to decide which company you should be talking to, the different, not products, but the different aspects of life insurance and what they mean, some of the pitfalls, and a couple of myths busted in this one as well. So definitely worth a listen. It's not super long, but super important. So if you have life insurance or if you don't, you really need to get your head around this stuff, because it just happens all too often is people have an accident either at work or riding the jet ski on the weekend or riding the kids' Razor scooter. I've heard more accident stories from adults inappropriately riding their kids'
things,
fun toys, and breaking ankles and elbows and collarbones and stuff than I have in the actual, dangerous sports like motorbike riding. So yeah, if you've got a Razor scooter in your house, you need to listen to this episode.
You really do.
Alrighty, so we're joined on today's episode by Antonio Perez. Did I say that right?
Correct. Yeah. Very well pronounced.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you for being so complimentary,
And
Antonio.
that's why I didn't want to start.
Yeah, because I looked at Nicole. It's like, you want to start? She's like, So Antonio is a guru when it comes to life insurance, or risk as it's called, risk insurance. And so, Antonio, welcome to the Tradies in Business podcast, mate.
Lovely to be here. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Now, I know that our listeners are really excited to hear you talk about life insurance.
I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are.
And they're all sitting there with bated breath and sweaty palms. But so you're from Skylight, which is part of BUSSQ's service. It's the financial planning division of BUSSQ. So, mate, you obviously didn't sort of start doing life insurance when you were 2 years old. Can you tell us a bit about how you came to be so lucky?
Oh, geez. That's, I don't know if it's a good story or a sad story, but effectively, I was visited at my home by a financial planner back in 2012. So at that time, I was actually working with a precast construction company. At that time, we'd gone through, obviously, as everybody did, the pitfalls of the GFC. I'd always been interested in finance, so that was always something in the background that I always enjoyed doing. During that visit with the financial planner, he raised a lot of areas and topics that I was completely unaware of, and that really prompted my interest. I'm just one of those types of people that I've come across something and it intrigues me. I want to know more about it. So after that meeting, I pursued my RG146, started doing that. And at that time, post GFC, it was turbulent times for a lot of businesses. And I was in charge of the construction, project supervision of the precast company at the time. And they were looking at severing that area. So I needed to look at other avenues. So I pursued that and sort of more or less fell into it. The next time I met with that same financial planner, he looked at me and he said, "You've obviously done your homework." I've done obviously that study, and like I said, it really intrigued me. So I pursued it further, and I found an opportunity through AMP Horizons, which was a graduate program that they were running at the time. And I thought that was a good way to sort of step in. I didn't want to just jump in to financial planning and pretend to know, okay, well, I'm sitting in front of people and pretend to know what I'm doing. I had to sort of take a bit of a gradual approach, and that was my way of getting in. So I did that graduate program, came out on the other side, and then effectively started working in the industry. But always, for some reason, dealing with a lot of accumulators, obviously, insurance is an integral piece of it. It's not the only piece of the puzzle, but it is a big portion of it, especially when you're dealing with that area, that division. So that's how actually is how I started. So yeah.
Awesome. So just literally out of personal interest, you've changed career. Definitely a career changer. So I was doing that graduate program, and I'm in the room with 30, 40 other people that are doing the course, all with sort of finance background and paraplanning background, and here I am
a precast construction operator, and completely different. So definitely out of my comfort zone. But I guess it's where you do your most learning. I definitely subscribe to the idea of be comfortable with the uncomfortable. So that was me, most definitely. Yeah.
I think it helps when you're passionate about something too, which clearly you must be, to make such a significant change in your life.
Yeah, look, I mean, at the time, obviously, with what had happened during the GFC, it was definitely a wake-up call for everyone, not just myself. But so, it was almost like, well, you need to look at. I said to myself, I need to look at something that is going to provide me with longevity, and obviously, as long as I was actually, as you mentioned, passionate and genuinely intrigued and wanting to pursue it, I just looked at the long term, and it's brought me here. So
Well, speaking of long term, that's really where we're going with today's episode. In one form or another, we're having a look at insurance, which is really, it's got to be top 3, top 5 questions we're asked all the time from tradies is, what insurance do I need? What should I have? Who do I talk to? Where do I go? And they're the questions you're going to answer for us today, Antonio.
Perfect. No problem.
Now,
I'll do my best.
Now, before we get into that, I think we should probably get this out of the way. We were put up to something by one of your colleagues, Antonio.
Brace yourself, Antonio.
I think it has something to do with an impression of someone. Is it,
Maybe something to do with a conference you were at recently.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's just be clear that when you're doing those sorts of things at those company functions, and the intention is not to be a star, but the intention is to entertain. It helps when the majority of the audience is inebriated, because then you come off as a star. So
I believe you really have come off as a star. We've heard about this little story maybe once or twice.
Yeah.
Well, 4 or 5 drinks, definitely might have. Yeah, they might have thought I sounded better than I actually did.
So what actually took place, Antonio? We want to get the lowdown from you because your colleague.
Oh, look, it was a really, really great function. It was our last company conference, and with Skylight and BUSSQ, and we're all in the same room, and they brought out the old karaoke machine, and so everybody was having a bit of a go. And you can as imagine, at the start of the night, maybe one drink in, you don't too well, but by the time I got on there, it was definitely towards the end of the night, and I decided to go with a bit of my background. So I'm Chilean born but raised in Canada, so that's probably where you're picking up a bit of an accent. But yeah, so I definitely went back to my Latin roots and decided I'm gonna belt out La Bamba, and it came off, and
and the rest is history.
Repeat it. I couldn't repeat it. They asked me to do it the next morning. I said, no, you don't want it.
It was a one-time performance. You're a one-hit wonder.
That's exactly it. Yeah, exactly.
But not when it comes to insurances. So
nice segue, Wise.
And I promise not to slip up and call you Ricky instead of Antonio.
Oh, thanks very much. I could tell you exactly what the Latin curse is. The Latin curse is your never-ending long name. So Antonio Perez is the short version. So we'll just keep it at that. Yeah.
So now I'm intrigued.
Yeah. So now that you've said that, what is your full name?
Okay. So the full name is Jose Antonio Perez Retamal. That's my full name.
Goodness.
Nice.
Yes, I know. It's a curse.
So is that typical for
Latin? For Latins, generally it is.
And is there a significance? Is it like part of that family names that you carry on with?
Yeah, so we always carry my mother's maiden name. So yes. Retamal is my mother's. So we'll carry that through.
Right.
Perez is my father's name, but we carry that as it's
wow.
a tradition.
Yeah. Yep.
Fantastic. We're getting a lesson in all sorts of things today, not just insurance. This is fantastic.
Us uncultured Aussies
absolutely
are learning a bit about the fact that there's other countries in the world with different traditions to ours. So Antonio, let's talk about insurance.
Okay.
What sort of insurance are we going to talk about with you today, and why is it important?
Okay, so in terms of what we look at under financial planning, it's relegated to personal insurances. So things like home and contents and car insurance and so forth. Those are what is regarded as general insurances. So it's not something that we deal with. We deal with personal insurances. So effectively, the way I like to explain personal insurance is it's like a jigsaw puzzle. 4 pieces of the puzzle essentially. So you've got life insurance, you've got TPD, which is totally and permanent disablement insurance, you've got income protection, and then you've also got trauma insurance or critical illness. Those are essentially the 4 pieces of the personal insurance puzzle.
And can you give us and I guess, we'll throw the disclaimer in here that everything we discussed today is general advice and it doesn't consider your personal circumstances. So if you're listening to this and you want to go and do something about it, then please go and see a financial advisor or a risk specialist. Obviously, we would encourage you to see someone from Skylight, like Antonio, and if you're really lucky, he might do a bit of La Bamba for you. But so yeah, general advice only. But across those 4 different products, Antonio, what are they all for? Because I think a lot of people get confused about, well, what's term cover and what's death cover and TPD? Why do I need that when I've got trauma cover? And if I've got trauma, how come I need income protection? And how do they all work together?
Yeah, perfect. And look, that's a common question that we get all the time, especially with the market segment that we deal with. Well, I've got income protection. Why do I need this? And so on. Well, and hence the reason why I try and simplify the discussion and relate back and reference back to those pieces of the jigsaw. So life insurance is effectively death insurance. Call it what it is. Or if you're diagnosed with a terminal illness, it's understanding that that's the purpose of that cover. So unlike TPD cover, total permanent disablement cover, which is more or less an occupation-related type of cover, because it does cover you in the event that you suffer an illness or an accident and that impedes you from ever returning back to work. And that's the key word there, is ever returning to work, okay? Which is way into income protection. So income protection, similar to TPD, is an occupation-related type of the personal insurance cover. However, it's if you suffer an illness or an accident that prevents you from going back to work for a period of time. So not ever, but for a period of time. That's where the income protection will come into play. And then you've got trauma insurance. Trauma insurance is similar to life insurance in that it's health related. It isn't so much occupation related. Okay, so trauma insurance will cover things like critical conditions essentially. So 3 of the most commonly claimed on: heart attack, cancer, stroke, are probably the most commonly claimed on in terms of critical conditions. So if you were to suffer one of those critical conditions, it's not saying that you're never going back to work. So that's why they think, oh, well, TPD. Well, no, it's not saying that you're never going back to work. If you're diagnosed with a critical condition, it may just be that you need time for recovery. And that's where the trauma insurance will come into play. So if you need a year off work, then you could potentially claim on your income protection if you're working at the time and you have that policy, but you may also be eligible for a trauma payout if you've got that as well.
What's some of the, I shouldn't say horror stories, Antonio, but and listeners who have tuned into the show for a while would probably know that I worked in the financial planning industry for a number of years, quite some time ago, in a couple of lives ago.
Sure.
But I guess, I used to hear some of the statistics, 15 plus years ago about how many people have cover, and more frighteningly, how many don't, and some of the big mistakes that people make. Can you give our listeners some insight into, again, why is this so important that they pay attention to it?
It's important. Not only for, so obviously with the clientele that we deal with, we do deal with primarily those involved in the building construction industry. It's not that, but it is probably the focused target market that we deal with. So, for example, someone that is a contractor, not a PAYG employee, and they don't have income protection policy. Well, they don't have that security of having an income going forward in the event of, because obviously they rely on projects, going forward and so on. If they were to suffer an illness or an accident, then haven't got that security of income. So you'd have to have obviously contingency plans in place. They may be building up their cash reserves and hopefully that was the case. But if they haven't got that, then the question that I always ask, well, what is the backup plan? What are we thinking about? And these are the discussions that we have all of the time.
Yep.
I guess it's really important to know, in terms of those four pieces of the puzzle, ownership structures as well is an area that we discuss with them as well. How do you wish to hold your insurances? So, I mean, as you mentioned before, there's a large percentage of the Australian population that is underinsured or potentially not insured at all. But you also have the threat of those that do have insurance being overinsured. So it's really important about understanding what exactly are the needs, what are your requirements, and having that insurance tailored to your specific needs in specific situation. So that's where we can obviously shed a little bit of light and provide that guidance, because it is important. I've got this love-hate relationship with insurance. I really do. And as you mentioned at the beginning, it is something that I sort of fell into and sort of developed a bit of a knowledge around it, and how to effectively structure something that is going to be of importance to one. So if you didn't have those insurances, then obviously that's a discussion that you have to say, well, what is it? What is the contingency? You hate paying the premiums, but if something did happen, you're really happy that you did, because it has come into play, and then all of a sudden you're receiving it. And only then, unfortunately, it's only then when something does occur, be to yourself or to someone that you know, that you start to see the value of insurances. Because if you didn't have it otherwise, you think, oh, geez, I wish I did. And to think of it as an afterthought it's already too late. Yeah.
Yep.
I'd really like to touch on the fact that one size doesn't fit all when it comes to insurance. We're all really different. What our exposure or our risk is really different. My insurance looks very different to my husband's insurance. Yet I think we're sold in a mass market on this one size fits all, and yet that's where we hear a lot of the horror stories we hear, that so many tradies aren't actually covered the way they thought or assumed they were covered. So can you talk to us, I guess, about how we ensure that we're getting the correct insurance for us and our personal needs?
Okay. Well, really, it's really about understanding what's important, what you would wish to cover in the event of. So you do have to sort of have that hypothetical conversation about, well, in the event of, what would you like to see happen? Because as you mentioned, it's going to be different for everyone. Everyone will have a different need, will have a different significant point that they want to make sure that they're covered for. Generally speaking, most people that seek to establish some sort of insurance wish to have their debts covered. Okay, that's sort of it's almost where you'd probably want to start. Then you have people that in the event of, they may wish to ensure that if they've got children, they want to ensure that, if in the event of, they'd have, if they were looking at private education, they'd want to ensure that that's being covered for in the event of. So, or others, it may be something different. There's no size, there's not one size fits all. That's a myth. And it shouldn't be the way insurances is sold. It should be tailored, and it should be specific to what the situation is and what's important, what those same people, for them, what's important for them in the event of.
Yeah. I feel like some of the confusion maybe comes from our familiarity with car insurance and house and contents, where it's pretty much just comes down to the value. Do you just want to replace the car at market value, or at an agreed value, and then if you've got some accessories and stuff that you want to cover, and then people look at life insurance and go, well, surely it's the same thing. It's just how much do I want, and who's got the cheapest premium. So is it that simple, Antonio?
No, look, it isn't, and it shouldn't be compared. I mean, that's one of the main reasons why distinguish what we do as financial planners in terms of the insurances that we look at, as opposed to someone that's just a broker that's dealing with general insurances. It's a different kettle of fish. It really is, and it should be specific. I guess one thing that I should point out with Skylight is in terms of the way we deliver advice, and if it is risk, and if it is the concern is primarily insurance, is ensuring that you have the right protection in place. We have a range of product providers that we deal with. They're all reputable providers because of that screening process. But what's different to what we do as opposed to potentially other practices that are out there is we do not accept commissions. And that has a significant difference in terms of premium. So, in the past, for those that may have had insurances established in the past, it may have been sold to them that, we can do insurances and there's no cost to you for doing it. We're going to, and look, to be quite honest, there's nothing that's done for free. So when they were set with those insurances up, they may have not been paying an out-of-pocket to have those insurances established, but they were paying it indirectly through whatever sort of commission structure was applied to those insurances. So back in the day, they may have had upfront commissions, which may have been 100 to 130% of whatever the upfront premium was, the initial premium. So it's quite substantial. And then you've got the ongoing commissions that tack on to after the first year, they tack on there. So indirectly, they're actually paying for that establishment of insurances through those commissions indirectly by the increase in premium. So that's something different that we do here. We strip all of that out. Yes, we work on a per service basis, but ultimately, when we provide that advice, we can almost guarantee that it's the best value for what you're getting.
Yeah.
But again, that's really important. People don't normally understand that, and that's a big component because it can make up 20-25% of whatever that premium is. So
wow.
Yeah.
That's
a hefty fee.
Significant, yeah.
And like I said, depending on how many years they've had it, well, they've had that ongoing commission being paid. They may have not even been in touch with their advisor because ultimately, because it wasn't part of their fee disclosure, it's just a commission that's tacked on. Well, they go years without contacting the advisor, yet when they get their policy schedule, up in the right-hand corner, they'll have your advisor is. Yep. Well, have you ever spoken to him?
Yeah.
Have you ever spoken to that person?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, they're just collecting the check every month.
Brings an interesting question, actually. How often should we be reviewing the insurance that we do have?
Look, essentially, I believe insurance is not a set and forget. It's definitely not a set and forget. You should be looking at that, I would say, if not annually, biannually, at bare minimum. You should be looking at that. Particularly if, a big portion of the insurance is to cover things like mortgage or so on. And if you've been aggressively attacking that mortgage over the course of the year, and a big component of that insurance benefit is directed at that mortgage, well, you know what? One way of combating that premium is to have a look at that. And if the need isn't there as it was when you first started, when we should start to look at that. And if need be, we can reduce. Yeah. And that obviously allows you to keep a good handle on that premium because it can get quite hefty depending on the premium structure that you've got.
Yeah. Yep. Now I've seen some pretty scary setups with people, and because of my background knowledge, when I hear some of the barbecue conversations, or even in our group in Tradies in Business, in our Facebook group, we've got nearly 1,400 trade business owners in there. And some of the water cooler advice that I see floating around from average people scares me a lot actually, because it's either because they're underinsured or they think they've got enough cover when in fact I take income protection, for example, wait periods and benefit periods. And, there's all this jargon that I think confuses people. And often it means they mistakenly think they're covered for things that they're not. Have you got some perhaps guidelines, Antonio, or examples of perhaps what someone came to you with and what they needed and the difference between the two, just to highlight that for our listeners?
I guess I would probably speak to that point. And again, because of the clientele that we deal with, income protection is definitely, I wouldn't say top priority, but it is a concern because obviously the statistics around, those sorts of individuals working on job sites, they tend to get injured a little bit more frequently than, let's say, your standard office worker, or so on. So obviously having that income protection in place is definitely of importance. Now, with income protection, I guess one of the myths is, if you've got income protection and it's 100% owned and held within your superannuation, it's important to understand that whilst you have that income protection policy, which is a great start, the threat with that, particularly for those that are contractors or sole traders, is if there was a gap in between their jobs. So let's say, for instance, you're on a project, you're a contractor, that project has stopped, and then there's a 3-month gap in between the next project starting. If you were to suffer an illness or an accident in that gap, you may not necessarily be covered because of what's referred to as gainful employment definition. So gainful employment, and this has to do if your income protection is completely held within super. If you were to suffer that illness or accident during that gap in work, you may not be eligible to claim with your income protection if it's solely held within superannuation. Because of that gainful employment definition. So one of the things that we look at is, again, very specific, very tailored, understand what type of person is sitting in front, what's the need, what's the risk. If they're a sole contractor, I definitely start to look at, okay, well, if cash flow is a concern, we could potentially look at holding a portion of it within super, but there also is an ability to have it like a split ownership structure whereby you can hold a portion of it directly. So that avoids that whole gainful employment definition risk that sole traders, contractors are faced with, and that they might not necessarily be aware of. Yeah.
I think for many, particularly tradies, their first brush with income insurance generally comes when we get our first home loan. And the bank is invested in selling us an insurance policy so that we cover the home loan in event something dreadful happens to us. And there's a big difference. And personally, that was my own experience for quite some time, until by fortune we met the right financial planner who sat us down and talked through our risk and what we were currently covered for. And to be quite frank, with the bank we were with, we were covered for nothing. We were in all sorts of bother if anything went wrong. And I think there's a false sense of security, particularly in the trade industry, of tradies that have been sold this insurance with their home loan as a package. We're going to package it all up for you so you don't have to think about it, and they're not actually covered. How do we understand what we are covered for and what we aren't? And for me, the biggest part of insurance is the security of knowing that I'm well covered, that in the event of anything happening to myself or my husband, we'll be paid swiftly. We've set ours up so we don't have long waiting times because we're tradies, and so we need that income pretty swiftly. We don't have a bunch of money in the bank. Our cash flow isn't always brilliant. So as a tradie, how do you understand what you're actually covered for? What sort of questions should we be asking? How do we get that knowledge?
Okay. That's look, it goes back to the old saying is, you don't know what you don't know. Unfortunately, with those instances, it's definitely worthwhile seeking a bit of guidance. Understanding where to go is probably the primary. Well, geez, where do I go for all of that?
Yes.
I guess when you're talking directly with the banks, obviously their mantra is obviously to align themselves with whatever bank product they're offering, and that necessarily isn't always the best option. So seeking independent guidance, independent advice, and someone, look, it can be myself or it can be anyone, as long as there isn't any sort of incentive there. So if it's a bank-aligned advisor, I would question whether there is any sort of influence there, any incentive driving that. So I'd be suspicious about that, and I'd be looking at independent, looking for someone. I wouldn't use that word loosely, but definitely someone that doesn't have that incentive or isn't looking at directing business elsewhere for their own particular gain. Yeah.
And things like wait periods and benefit periods and all those sorts of things. I mean, what are some of the things that people really need to understand about that terminology, Antonio?
Yeah, in terms of the wait period, so effectively, if someone were to suffer an illness or an accident that prevented them from returning to work, so speaking specifically about income protection, they'd need to serve whatever that wait period is. So if it's a 30-day wait period, they'd serve that wait period, lodge their claim, and then that would be processed. So if it takes, it may take up to 60 days before the actual claim is paid, but they'll pay 30 days in arrears. So, but you've got to serve the initial wait period, whatever that may be. So understanding that, if they're paying in arrears, the benefit amount of whatever that agreed benefit amount is understand that it may not necessarily just be 30 days. For instance, if I'm just using that as an example, you may have to ensure that you have cash reserves that can keep you going for up to 60 days potentially. Yeah. So understanding how that works. Now, the benefit period is effectively how long, once you do go on claim, how long you would continue to receive that benefit, provided you're not able to go back to work. So if it's a 2-year benefit period, then you would receive that for the full duration. If you're unable to go back to work, it's important to understand that once you're over that benefit period, benefit payments will cease.
They stop. Yeah.
So many tradies don't understand this. And how many times do we see in the group alone a poor, unfortunate tradie who's had an accident and they're 60 days in and there's still no money coming, and they haven't planned for that because they didn't understand.
Because they took a 90-day wait period to make the premiums cheaper and thought, well, perhaps without even fully understanding that it could be 120 days before they actually see any money from their insurance.
Correct. And that's the significance of that discussion is before they walk out of a meeting with any one of my colleagues, myself, it's important that they understand that they really need to understand that the decisions that they make now, and it's, when you're trying to sort of manage between cash flow and minimizing out-of-pocket expense and ensuring that you've got something of quality, well, you need to understand that for every action there's an opposite and equal reaction. So understand what that is, and if you do decide that you're gonna set up your income protection with a longer duration wait period, understand, well, this is what it's going to look like in the event of. So if you're happy with that, well, and we provide warnings around that, because obviously as a matter of process, it's understanding what their situation is. So in terms of recommendations that we make, we'd be making recommendations based upon whatever their situation is. So on the back of the information we've collected, this is what we would recommend simply because of what you've told us and what we've been able to collect. So ultimately, the recommendations we make are definitely at their discretion, but we wouldn't be making recommendations if we didn't believe it was in their best interest, pure and simple. Yeah.
And obviously that's why, Tradies in Business, we really do advocate that people go and see someone like yourself. Again, doesn't have to be from Skylight, but, go and see a professional advisor that does this, that knows the different products and can give advice and guidance on what's most appropriate. Because, a 90-day wait might be completely appropriate for somebody who has the cash reserves or is willing to take the self-insurance risk for that period. But for someone who's got no money in the bank and, a massive mortgage and 4 kids and a wife who doesn't work, a 90-day wait could cripple that family from something as simple as a busted ankle. Because you're a scaffolder and you can't work for 3 months while you're on crutches and therefore not derive an income as an ABN holder, and that could be the end of your mortgage, I mean, that's how catastrophic some of these scenarios can be.
Most definitely. I sat down with a couple just the other day, and he's a glazier. So he works full time. She does not work, but they have 2 children with disabilities. So effectively, she stays at home with the kids, and they're still young kids, so she's got to care for them and take care of them. And the discussion around that was, well, in the event, so obviously, because it was primarily they wanted to look at insurances for him. I said, well, so that's something that we can have a look at, and it's going to be specific. But understand that if something were to happen to her, what would happen to who's going to take care of the kids in the event that she wasn't able to do that? Are you going to step back from work? And so that discussion quickly evolved into something that they weren't even expecting. They hadn't even contemplated, because you need to look at it from all angles. There may be just one, effectively the main breadwinner, but when you look at the impact that would have on the other person who's maybe 100% home duties, and in that sort of situation, it's quite significant, because obviously the cost of a carer is not, it can be quite expensive. So you need to have a look at that.
And that's the advantage of choosing the right professional to work with, I think, is you're trained to look at a family situation in a different way than we see it. So, that wife obviously just assumed that if something happened to her, I guess maybe you don't even think about it. But a trained professional can take a look at the individual circumstances and think, okay, if you can no longer perform your duties at home, who's going to do it? How much is that going to cost? We need to look at putting a plan in place in case something does happen to you. And the circumstances, probably the biggest lesson I'd like, well, there's two things I'd like every trader to take from today. Number one, they need insurance. And number two, it needs to be regularly reviewed, because things change so rapidly and you don't think about it. But that professional sitting across from you is trained to help you realize and understand your risk. That person on the end of the phone, maybe that's connected with the bank, probably doesn't care about your circumstances. They just care about the commission they're going to make. What you need to find is an independent person who can sit with you, have a look at your individual circumstances, and find the right products for you.
Definitely.
We see it all the time. It's really upsetting to see these tradies who are just slogging their guts out. Something goes wrong and then everything falls down, and it happens just far too quickly and far too often.
Yeah. Look, and that's something that we, it's almost a call to action. I previously sat on the other side of the fence. I was retail before aligning myself with Skylight, and it was, I imagine you would understand this, but really that alignment in terms of how you want to exercise your profession, and that alignment is key. It's understanding where you feel you're going to be able to develop yourself professionally and align yourself with a practice that has your own ethics and your own values, and that's a really of key relevance. I sat on the other side of the fence, and it was hard slog getting up in the morning, because I knew what I had to do, and sometimes it wasn't always the best thing. And I've joined Skylight. I've been with them just over a year now, and it definitely aligns with my values. And those are the people that we primarily work with. And it's those blue collars, hard workers, doing the best that they can for their families. And this is where we try to provide that sort of that. We'll take this off your plate, because you have enough on your plate. If we can help you with this, and that's what we'll do. Most definitely.
It's no different to outsourcing your bookkeeping or your accounting or whatever other service in your business that you don't have enough time to be educated about. You need to find the right partner to work with.
Yeah. And most definitely. And that's key.
It's baffled me for years, the idea that people have that if they go and speak to a particular company, a provider of a product, and in this case, life insurance products, that they have this idea that somehow they're going to get the best advice from that company, whereas, in the mortgage market, at least there seems to be some awareness that, well, if I go talk to XYZ bank, of course they're only going to sell me their mortgage product. So if I talk to a mortgage broker, they're going to tell me which of the banking products are best for me, not best for the bank. And yet when it comes to some insurances, particularly life insurance, there's this, and I don't want to be disrespectful to our listeners, but there's almost like an ignorance of the fact that if I talk to one company about their insurance products, they're only going to tell me about those products. And they may or may not be suited to my needs. So, if you go talk to a Ford dealer, they're not going to sell you a Holden. They're going to sell you a Ford. And Ford might be the worst car you could buy for your needs. So, go talk to a vehicle broker. So I guess, that's really the big message I want to get across to people, other than the technical aspects of wait periods and different insurance types, is please go talk to somebody that can look at all of the products available on the market, or at least, the main ones, and say, well, based on what you need, Warwick, this is probably going to be the best fit.
Most definitely. Yeah, because essentially, look, you've hit the nail on the head, or it's definitely about the strategy. It's about what's of relevance. And you know what? To be quite honest, I could care less who it is.
Yeah.
But if we work out the strategy, if we really understand and really hone in on what the need, what's the concern, what's the best strategy, then we'll look at product as secondary. And whatever product it is that best supports that strategy, well, guess what? That's what we'll look at. But we don't start from the other end and work back. That's not the way we operate.
No.
Yeah.
So, Antonio, I'm going to ask my favourite question, and it doesn't mean that we have to wrap up here, but mate, I like to ask our guests, if you had 1,000 trade business owners in a room, what's one thing that one pearl of wisdom, or one action point, or something that you would like to tell all of them?
I would say I would definitely encourage them to ask questions. So don't accept the pretense that there isn't one solution that is the perfect fit for everyone. Whatever questions you feel you need to ask, whether that be 1 or 10 or however many you feel you need to ask that question. Because only then can you satisfy yourself. It's like when you're speaking to people about tolerances to risk and so on. Not just because your neighbor or your friend or your mate is invested a certain way, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right fit for you. So in order to understand what your own tolerance to risk is you need to delve into, well, you know what? Is this the way I'm being invested? Is it going to allow me to sleep at night? And if it doesn't, and it's concerning you, then it's probably not the right fit for you.
Yeah.
So you ask the questions, most definitely.
Great advice, mate. Great advice. So as far as getting more information about, you, I really want to see if there's like YouTube footage of you doing, leading everybody in the La Bamba. But
did you dance as well, or were you just singing?
No, I'm a male, Nicole. You know that we can't do multitasking, so it's either me and the microphone and that's it,
or you and the dance floor.
Yeah, I think that the singing probably would be better than the dancing. Most definitely.
Yeah.
I think we'll need a repeat performance at our Christmas party. You'll need to come along and belt out a tune or two for us.
You could be the hired
As long as
talent.
you call me at the end of the night when everybody's had a few.
Done.
We
can do that.
Yeah,
we can do that.
Cool. So where should people go? Where should our listeners go to find out more about, I guess, what we've talked about today, Antonio?
Definitely. So you can definitely have a Google search for us. So just search Skylight. So it's skylight.com.au. So have a look at that. Or there's through the BUSSQ website through to Skylight. So it's important to understand that, while Skylight is built by BUSSQ, we don't necessarily just exclusively deal with BUSSQ members. So we're an open practice, and really it's anyone who's looking for quality advice. We're able to assist, and we're not exclusively to BUSSQ. So that's important to note. And like I said, I guess the point of difference for us in terms of our client value proposition is we're very transparent, and in terms of the cost of advice will be determined by the scope of advice. So whatever it is that you're looking for will determine the cost of advice, but we're very upfront with that. Black and white, we'll let you know what that is. And then you tell us yay or nay effectively. Yeah.
Same as a tradie. It's like, here's the quote.
Black and white.
Fixed price. Yeah. Love it.
Really simple, isn't it?
Awesome. Well, Antonio, thank you very much for your time today. And thanks for managing to make life insurance way less painful and dry than it could have been. But definitely a very important topic, and great to know there's people like you out there who are actually passionate about it and want to help people make the right choices. So thank you.
No, my pleasure. Thanks again, guys. And yes, hopefully, in those videos that you'd mentioned, there are some videos. I think you can do them through the Skylight website as well. And there is a video in relation to business insurance. So business insurance that ties into obviously personal insurances, effectively the same tools, but it gives people that are in that area a bit more insight as well.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Great stuff. All right, we'll put all the links to that in the show notes. So thanks again.
No worries. Thanks, guys.
It's pretty rare that we talk to somebody so passionate about insurance.
Yeah, but it's a good thing. It's comforting, actually, to know that there's people that passionate about what they do.
Yeah.
Particularly something as boring as insurance.
And it's especially good that Antonio is really passionate about insurance because he needs a bit of help with the tech side of things.
And so does his partner in crime from our retirement planning episode earlier. So the boys don't know that we actually grabbed this before we jumped on with Antonio for this episode, but we happened to press record early, which I'm in the habit of doing these days.
You are?
And it's paid off. After 5 years of this podcast, I managed to get some incriminating audio. It's a bit of fun. Have a listen to this. These guys are great at what they do, and they're definitely not going to go into the IT industry anytime soon. So enjoy this little outtake.
You just did this.
I know. I should know, but I set myself
my
up properly.
goodness.
Can you see him?
No.
Can you hear him?
We can hear you.
Start video.
Look, it says start video here.
Yeah.
Like,
There you
Hey!
But I probably had to set myself up before because
I had my tour guide that understands the ropes apparently. But
But not really.
vastly more than you.
okay, all right.
It's like we're both fit to do race.
Fly away.
You've been listening to the Tradies in Business podcast with Warwick Bidwell and Nicole Cox. Find out more about today's guest, tools for your trade business, and other cool stuff at tradiesinbusiness.com.au.